Hello, my name is Patrick Hope. This summer I've been working on COVID through the lens of high school education's learning disparities. As we all know, COVID-19 has affected billions of people around the world, not only abroad, but also right here in the American home front, where education has been uniquely affected by it. Classes have moved for the majority of schools from the in-person traditional classroom into virtual classrooms that are conducted from the homes of students and teachers alike. Unfortunately, one of the big issues with this is that it's had a huge impact on students' performance and their ability to learn, which has been greatly diminished through COVID-19. Obviously, from a high school lens, over 15 million high school students within the United States were forced to make the transition to online classes starting in March, many of which will return to doing online classes to begin the fall semester, depending on the school districts that they live in, whether they have the technology, whether they have the financial support to be able to make the online classrooms available to students. My focus for this research was really to look at the hardships of many students facing this pandemic, one of which was definitely students who are struggling from an economic background standpoint, if they're living in single parent homes, maybe just low income neighborhoods, if they're forced to work, if they're just a variety of different things, if they don't have the technological support that they need, but also from a racial point of view, which can also be seen through economic background as well. Obviously, COVID-19 has impacted different groups, often minority groups, more severely than oftentimes white majority groups. So I think those are both two things that we have to consider when we're doing research, and the impact that making the shift from a traditional classroom where you were able to build those relationships with professors and teachers and other students to now working at home where you maybe you don't have the same home environment that might be conducive to learning. So my research began with looking at education inequality within our system before COVID-19. I looked at an article titled Race, Cultural Capital, and Educational Resources, Persistent Inequalities and Achievement Returns. What I found there is that traditionally low-income students or students living in single-parent homes, they tend to struggle with education, with having the same opportunity as other students, whether it has to do with something as simple as like tutoring, or maybe the same amount of time to work as home, or just parental support. Being able to learn things, have someone, an older person, someone with more advanced knowledge, being able to be there by your side, helping you do your homework or study, or just teach you life skills that can carry over into the classroom. I also looked at just more recent research that we've seen and seen how COVID-19 has exacerbated the educational inequality within our country. I looked at articles just titled The COVID Slide, What Summer Learning Loss Can Tell Us About the Potential Impact of School Closures on Student Achievement and Academic Achievement. They use sites such as UNESCO to kind of look into that, as well as data, just to see what impact students might have due to what might be impacting students as they start back at school. Beyond my research, I also interviewed a lot of teachers from different areas, from both Kentucky and Georgia. Within Kentucky, I looked at speaking to teachers from Will County, more rural areas, as well as my time in Georgia. I was able to come in contact with teachers from more urban areas, that see a lot more racial diversity within their schools, different from what you might see in rural Kentucky. What I found through those interviews is a lot of different things. Just rural communities and urban communities facing similar struggles with students who are low achieving. Oftentimes, the gap between students who are low achievers during this time of COVID-19 is only widening, leaving a group of students left behind. And also the issue of students who are struggling with struggling in low income households. Oftentimes they are faced with issues, with technological limitations at home, being able to stay in contact with their teachers, which ultimately has led to student performance to drop, and just not have the same learning experience that they would traditionally have in a classroom where they're able to build relationships with teachers and students alike in a more traditional setting. Unfortunately, with COVID-19, another issue that I saw I saw with teachers was that many of them were very uncomfortable with the idea of having to continue to do classes online beginning in the fall, because though they have had more time to prepare and adjust the classroom, a major concern that you see is students just not being in that correct environment conducive to learning. Whether a student has had to take up an extra job to help support their family, just a lot of different problems. Also, with just a rise in domestic violence or child abuse that's occurring at homes, just due to the amount of time being spent. That was definitely a concern that I heard from Marjorie Rush, a teacher at Bull County High School, is that ultimately students being in those homes for longer periods of time is putting them at a greater risk of potentially facing abuses that will affect them long term, and not only academically, but also emotionally, just socially. I think we have a lot of issues that are exacerbated by the fact that students are having to continue their education at home. At this point, my findings thus far, I've kind of led myself into the direction of trying to look at education as not only a time where you're learning information, but you're also, in a social setting with students, with teachers, where you're able to learn, you're able to interact with other students. And that is something really important to the emotional side of students. That is something very important to, just their social identity, as well as teachers who, have really dedicated their lives to teaching. And I think many teachers feel that being forced to go online, that they're not getting the same thing out of teaching as they had been when they were able to be in person with the students that they care a lot about, and that the reasons they got into education have really been damaged by COVID-19 and being forced to not have that face-to-face interaction that they're used to. What I believe schools are starting to make the change to, as they are able to understand technology, able to just utilize it better, is trying to have as much contact with students, whether it's via Zoom, in one-on-one meetings with students, or just requiring students to be on the Zoom calls in the groups, communicating with each other in small groups or in a greater class discussion. As we start to continue into the fall, I think there's a strong belief within high school education that students have the understanding of technology, and teachers are supported with counties being willing to spend extra resources on training, that they're able to kind of put themselves in a better situation to handle online learning and learning virtually that they otherwise were not prepared for beforehand. Obviously, based on what I've looked at the same time, teachers and students alike are still going to be struggling with that lack of that social awareness that they have when they're in the classroom. Just having that opportunity to be in the class, I think, is something that will be missed, and during this time has allowed schools to realize the importance of. And as we try to get back to normal, I think the consensus is that students until then, especially low-income students from low-income households, are going to, be at a disadvantage. That inequality is going to continue to grow just because they're having a lot of other outside pressures that is putting them in the situation where they have to take care of their family in ways they hadn't had to before due to just the circumstances that jobs have caused and the loss of jobs and really just the economic situation that people were in. I think it should be a chief concern in the future, and future research should be focused on what long-term impact does COVID-19 have on students in low-income areas, students in minority groups that also tend to have a more low-income group within it, just to see the performance of students as COVID has continued to, favor students that may have, education opportunities that other students just don't have. Like I mentioned, tutoring, just a family that is able to be supportive of their needs. That school systems now need to figure out how can we expand that to students outside of just the middle class or upper class in our society at this point. Thank you for your time. I'm very excited to kind of look into this more in the future. But it's just very good experience this summer looking into it. And again, thank you very much.